You begin with an assumption so familiar that it rarely appears as an assumption at all. You believe that to be complete, clear, or real, something must be done. Improvement feels necessary. Progress feels meaningful. Every valuable state appears to sit at the end of effort. Yet this belief quietly hides a paradox. Existence itself is already present, while fulfillment is treated as distant. You live, yet you strive to arrive. Ibn Arabi questioned this structure directly. He did not ask how to reach reality. He asked whether reality could ever be something reached. If existence is already the case, then effort cannot produce it. This raises an unsettling question. If reality is not missing, what exactly is effort trying to solve? You were not born believing that reality must be earned. This belief was taught. From early on, value was tied to results. Approval followed achievement. Knowledge came through accumulation. Religion, education, and ambition reinforced the same pattern. Nothing important is given freely. Meaning must be deserved. This conditioning feels practical. It appears to organize life and encourage responsibility. Yet, it also installs a deeper assumption. That being itself is insufficient without improvement. You begin to measure yourself constantly. Where am I lacking? What remains unfinished? When will I be enough? This way of thinking rarely questions its own foundation. It assumes lack as a starting point. Ibn Arabi did not deny effort in practical matters. He questioned whether effort belonged at the level of reality itself. If effort is endless, clarity never stabilizes. If worth must always be earned, rest never arrives. The question becomes unavoidable. Who benefits from a world where reality is treated as something you must qualify for? Ibn Arabi introduced a quiet but radical challenge to the idea of becoming. He observed that becoming only makes sense if something essential is absent. Growth assumes incompleteness. Arrival assumes distance. Yet reality, if it exists at all, cannot be partially present. He did not argue against learning, discipline, or ethical action. His challenge was more precise. He asked whether truth itself could be the result of a process. If something must be achieved, it implies it was not there before. But if reality were absent, no effort could bring it into existence. Becoming, in this view, addresses misunderstanding rather than absence. You do not grow into reality. You mistake yourself as separate from it. Effort then becomes a response to confusion, not a path to truth. This idea destabilizes the familiar hierarchy of seeker and sought. If there is nothing to reach, then striving loses its spiritual authority. The unsettling question remains: if becoming is unnecessary, why does it feel so compelling? You tend to think of presence as unstable. At times, there is clarity. At other times, there is distraction. From this fluctuation, you conclude that presence comes and goes. You believe it must be cultivated and maintained. Ibn Arabi questioned this conclusion by examining its logic. If presence disappears, something must notice its absence. That noticing cannot itself be absent. Otherwise, absence would not be known. This reveals a confusion between experience and the condition that allows experience. Thoughts change. Attention shifts. Understanding varies. But the capacity for any of this to be noticed does not fluctuate in the same way. When presence is treated as an object or state, effort becomes necessary. You try to regain what you believe was lost. But if presence is not a state, then it was never absent. What changed was interpretation, not reality. This leads to a deeper question. Are you trying to restore presence, or are you trying to correct a misunderstanding about what presence actually is? Effort feels responsible. It appears to demonstrate seriousness and commitment. But effort always begins with a belief. Something essential is missing. Without this belief, effort would have no direction. Ibn Arabi suggested that effort often reinforces the very separation it tries to resolve. By striving, you confirm the idea that you stand outside reality. Each practice implies distance. Each method implies delay. This does not mean effort is wrong. It means effort is addressing confusion rather than absence. When confusion is not examined, effort becomes endless. One method replaces another. One stage leads to the next. Completion is always postponed. The crucial shift occurs when effort itself is questioned. What if effort is not the cure, but the symptom? What if striving continues because the underlying assumption is never challenged? If effort presupposes distance from reality, can it ever eliminate that distance? Or does it quietly preserve the belief that something is still missing? At the center of effort stands a familiar figure, the self who must arrive. This self evaluates progress, compares states, and anticipates completion. It assumes reality is elsewhere. Ibn Arabi examined this self with careful attention. He asked whether this striving identity could be found apart from thought. When you look directly, the self appears as a narrative, an idea that claims ownership of experience. If this self is observed, it cannot be the observer. If it is measured, it cannot be the measure. Yet it is treated as the one who must reach the truth. This creates a contradiction. The self that strives is itself part of what is observed. How can what is observed be the one that must arrive? When this contradiction is seen clearly, striving begins to loosen. Not because effort is rejected, but because the one who claimed to need completion is no longer taken as real. This leaves a question without an answer. If the striving self is only a thought, who was supposed to arrive? Ibn Arabi made a careful distinction between two kinds of knowledge. One accumulates. The other clarifies. Acquired knowledge adds information. Realized knowledge removes misunderstanding. You are familiar with accumulation. You gather concepts, explanations, and interpretations. Each addition feels like progress. Yet confusion often remains intact beneath the knowledge. Recognition works differently. Nothing is added. Something false is released. When confusion ends, clarity does not appear as a new state. It is simply what remains when error is gone. This challenges the idea that realization is an achievement. If nothing new is gained, there is nothing to claim. No position is reached. No status is earned. This raises a quiet but destabilizing question. If realization does not add anything to you, why has it been treated as a personal accomplishment? Stillness is often imagined as a result. You believe it appears after effort succeeds. When effort resumes, stillness seems to vanish. From this, you conclude that stillness is fragile. Ibn Arabi reversed this logic. He implied that stillness is not produced. It is interrupted. Activity does not destroy it. Misinterpretation obscures it. When you notice stillness, you may think it has arrived. But notice the sequence carefully. The noticing comes after stillness is already present. Effort did not create it. Attention simply stopped interfering. If stillness were an outcome, it would depend on conditions. But anything dependent on conditions is unstable. Stillness, if it is real, cannot depend on effort. This leads to a subtle recognition. Effort can only modify experience, not reality. If stillness is already the case, what effort could bring it closer? The idea of ending effort often creates resistance. You fear that without striving, life will collapse into passivity. Meaning appears tied to pursuit. Ibn Arabi did not suggest abandoning action. He questioned the belief that action completes you. When seeking ends, function remains. Thought continues. Choice operates. Life does not disappear. What ends is the belief that fulfillment lies ahead. Without this belief, action becomes simpler. It no longer carries the burden of self-completion. You may notice that nothing essential is lost when striving softens. What disappears is tension, not intelligence. What fades is anxiety, not clarity. This reveals an important insight. Effort was not sustaining reality. It was sustaining a belief about reality. When that belief loosens, what exactly has been removed? A reality that offers no method feels threatening. Methods promise progress and authority. They reassure you that you are moving in the right direction. Ibn Arabi's teaching removes this reassurance. If reality is already present, no method can grant access. No sequence can deliver what is not absent. This does not leave you empty. It leaves you without a strategy for becoming real. The discomfort arises not from lack, but from the loss of control. You are no longer guided by steps. You are faced with direct recognition. This recognition cannot be delegated. It cannot be certified. The question becomes personal and immediate. Are you willing to consider that what you seek does not respond to method at all? You arrive at a simple clarity, not as a conclusion, but as an absence of confusion. Existence was never missing. Effort belonged to misunderstanding, not to reality. Ibn Arabi did not replace effort with a new doctrine. He removed the question that made effort feel necessary. When nothing needs to be achieved, striving loses its authority. What remains is not a state, but a recognition. Nothing has been added. Nothing has been lost. The opening question returns, transformed by understanding. If reality never required effort, what remains of the one who believed it must be reached?